Once upon a time, there was a terrestrial orchid. When this orchid was first conceived, a mutation took place within its genome. This mutation caused the cell wall to not develop. For the most part, the orchid lived happily among many others in the Amazon rainforest. For a long time, there was a drought, which led to a lack of water in the environment and forced the orchid into a state where it would do anything to conserve water. But one day, a tropical rainstorm oversaturated the soil in which the plant life lived. This caused the area to flood and prevented oxygen from entering the plants. Initially, because of the amount of water in the soil, the plants overabsorbed H2O. Water rushed through the xylem at an increasing rate until it reached the cells of the orchid. Given that the heads of the phospholipids are polar, hydrophilic, in all cell membranes, the water first met the cell by submerging itself in the top layer of the cell membrane. As all dehydrated plants do, and any other plant with more water outside of the cell than inside of the cell, the orchid diffused the water through a protein channel, also known as osmosis, to allow the water to enter the vacuole of the cell. The cell even utilized aquaporin to transport water through the cell membrane without realizing that there was a swelling vacuole. Unfortunately, because the plant had initially lacked water, it performed facilitated diffusion in order to catalyze the process of water intake.
Now, the plant was in a predicament. The vacuole had absorbed an abundance of water and pressed upon the cell membrane of the plant. Glycoproteins were being used left and right to communicate to other cells the potential for damage and the hypotonic state of many cells were in. To make things worse, there were a colony of bacteria that lived within some of the runoff that reached the orchid. Despite going against the concentration gradient to remove much of the bacteria that came in with the water, many of the plant cells became infected. The phytoplasma cells caused the cell to wilt from the inside out. Because the cells of the orchid lacked a cell wall and structure, the abundance of water severely damaged the plant. So the vacuole, along with the cell, reached a turgid state and exploded. The orchid had developed a resistance so that it could filter out all the excess water that it had absorbed.
A few days later, the sun came back out and absorbed most of the remaining water from the massive storm in the Amazon rainforest. The orchid thanked the sun for what he did and continued to perform osmosis on the water that the sun had left over, despite having lost many of its cells due to overhydration. The integral and peripheral proteins of the cells also contributed in directing the energy of the cells to release some of the water that the orchid had taken in. The orchid also politely asked Mother Nature that there would never be another drought in the rainforest. Mother Nature appreciated the request and said that she would only accept the request if the orchid could produce enough nectar for all the bees in all of the Amazon rainforest. Both the orchid and Mother Nature came through with what they needed to accomplish, and both lived happily ever after, along with the sun and other plant life in the Amazon rainforest. Thank you. In the end.